Welcome back to Around the Table with Stacy Smith. We're talking politics in the upcoming election and who might win and who might just lose. Jim, let's stay on the national level here for a second. The Senate, of course, is critical for the Democrats to at least maintain a 50-50 split with a deciding vote by the vice president. So who will have control of the Senate in January?
I suspect the Democrats are still the party that will hold serve in that regard. Pennsylvania got close, as we know. I still maintain that Fetterman will squeak this out. Ohio is interesting. I think Ohio has a great chance, to stay, be in the Democratic column. Keep an eye down on Florida. Marco Rubio has a fight that he had not anticipated. I know many of the polls are showing enough of a margin for him to be victorious in the end, but he's in for the fight of his life down there against a very qualified candidate. But having said all that, again, there's just too much of a hill for the Republicans to climb on the Senate side. I suspect it could get as close as 50-50, which is a win for the Ds with the vice president breaking the tie. But I think it'll be more like 51 or 52 on the blue side. The House, we've already talked about that. But I do think that the Senate is still for the Democrats to lose. I don't think that will happen.
So you are predicting the Democrats will pick up a seat or two.
I will not, again, I said this a couple times. I won't fall off my chair if they do. It is not outside the realm of possibility that they do that.
Well, I have to say that, with these 35 races in the United States Senate, I have to agree with my colleagues. It's going to be a photo finish. There's a lot of very close races within the margin of error. The only reason I feel encouraged that we will establish a new majority for Republicans in the United States Senate is those issues that are polling late in the campaign, I think all favor the GOP. The economy, inflation, crime, and a porous southern border. They change all the time. These weren't necessarily the issues coming out of our primary back in May, but in the last two polling in October, these were the top of the list, and all those favor Republicans. And that's why I give the advantage to Republicans in taking over the United States Senate in 6 days.
Well, we can't forget about mail-in voting yet again. It's early voting. And then by the night of the Oz-Fetterman debate, at least 48%, maybe as high as 70% of the mail-in vote had been cast. Some of it was still residing at the post office, probably not yet in the elections department. I think that vote favors Fetterman, and I think it's often that way across the country. So depends on how much that early vote got in and when it got in. The issues did change. Republicans scored some points on crime because they like those fear tactics, and that does scare people. And I'm not, and that's even a legitimate fear. But I still think it's advantage Democrats. We're going to hang on to the Senate.
You bring up the fear factor. I have to counter with just saying that ever since I can remember following elections, Republicans were going to cut Social Security or do away with it as well. So, I mean, the fear factor works both ways.
They've tried a few times, and thank God for us old guys, they weren't successful.
But let's go back to that fear factor and talking about crime. Crime's an issue, and I think subliminally to a lot of people, we're seeing more crime on TV here in the western part of the state, more shootings on a regular basis than we did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I don't know how that's going to affect the voters when they go in there. I suspect that if they think that crime is a problem, they're going to go to the Republican side when they start voting.
If in exit polling, we see that if the R's have a good night, and one of the reasons they have a good night is because voters felt as if the R's were better on the issue of crime. I'll share my thoughts with studying the film at that time on what happened in that regard and what should have been done differently. I know that these are doing their best to push back on that narrative that they are not the party to go, or that they're not the party to keep us safe. They're fighting hard on that issue. But again, hypothetically, if it breaks for the R's on that issue, there will be plenty to talk about on that on a subsequent show.
Sure.
All right. Go ahead. All right. I was just going to throw this out just for fodder here, and that is going back to the Real Clear Politics averages and how they're making their predictions now. And because of underweighting the GOP in previous elections, Real Clear Politics is now kind of predicting that the GOP will have pick up 4 seats. It'll be a 54 to 46 majority for the GOP in the Senate.
Well,
They're
That's
guessing.
even surprising for me. That's actually more than
See?
I thought.
Yeah.
I thought the high water mark would be 3, but I can tell you after this broadcast, I'm going to look up that poll and see what they're talking about.
Well, it's
Hey,
not
the
really.
only
Take a
poll
look at that
counts
one.
as election night. I mean, the polling business itself is suffering. They don't even know how to get a good sample these days. So I always get a kick out of what we're doing here. When people say who's going to win, we're going to know in a few days.
Right. But it's fun to talk about it. I mean, that's
Yeah, it is fun. Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have a show if we couldn't talk about it.
exactly.
I was going to say, thank God
Stacy,
people are
let me throw in one more thing that just recently
Absolutely.
happened, is the Supreme Court, Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision,
Yeah.
making it clear that ballots that get mailed in, if they don't have a date on it, they have to put that ballot aside and sequester it, and they can't put it into the count at that point in time. I think that decision of giving certainty to all 67 counties in Pennsylvania might calm down the rhetoric that we would see otherwise, and that we saw 2 years ago. Hopefully
Yeah,
that's
it might, Governor, and it's not a lot of votes.
No.
It's a few thousand votes maybe, which can make a difference in a local race, a tight race. But it was 3-3 in front of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court with the unfortunate tragic passing of Chief Justice Max Baer. But if it settles people down, I'm sort of okay with that.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that is absolutely needed after that, what happened in 2020. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.